And I started to think about this idea of order of operations quite a bit after I heard Owen O'Flanagan talk about Giancarlo's application of the corkscrew toe hold, where basically Owen said it's normally a move, but Giancarlo first put his foot on Owen's bottom leg. Then he built height and put his chest over Owen's foot. Then he took the initial grip and brought his chest even closer. So by the time he locked it up, Owen didn't have much time to defend, and Giancarlo was stepping on his bottom leg, making it difficult for Owen to build height. So on the biggest stage in front of 13,000 people, Owen is forced to tap to a move because of the order of operations. So bringing this back to the match between Gordon and Nicky Rod. The top player is often going to try and knock your hand and elbow past your rib cage because they're trying to get an underhook. And to prevent that, the bottom player is going to want to keep their elbow in line with their rib cage. So often when you're grip fighting, it's a good idea to maybe take a collar tie, and as your opponent clears the collar tie, you grab their arm with your bottom hand. So now when you bring your own elbow behind your rib cage, you're controlling their hand so they can't shoot in for an underhook, and you're able to take your 2-on-1 grip. So Nicky's able to successfully pummel inside the knee shield of Gordon. And what Nicky would like is for Gordon to take his top arm out and try to win back that battle. And Gordon gets away with it in this scenario because he has a frame with his lower body, which prevents Nicky from exploiting that space and shooting in for an underhook. But if Gordon does not have a frame with his lower body, he has to be super disciplined with his elbow position. And you can see he first brings his foot to the top of Nicky's thigh, which prevents Nicky from coming towards him. So he reestablishes a lower body frame before he takes his hand out to address Nicky's hand position. And as he shoves Nicky's hand down, Gordon pummels in his butterfly hook as well as 2 underhooks and goes right on the attack. If you go onto Gordon Ryan's Instagram and you scroll past the best day of my life,
woo! 44, that's me! Get some cold cuts, get some cold cuts, get some cold cuts. Woo!
And keep on going down, you'll see his post about Shy Ace, who was one of Gordon's training partners under Danaher. And in this instructional, Shy Ace talks about the idea of skimming the leg, where when you're attacking an outside heel hook and you throw over your reaping leg, you should expect your opponent to spin very aggressively and use their second foot to push off of you to free themselves from your attack. But if you take your non-reaping leg and as your opponent spins, you can slide down their secondary leg and trap it, giving you the ability to control both of your opponent's legs and get a strong finish. Now, this is such a good observation, and I wish I could take credit for it. But it was pointed out to me by someone in my community, which, as you can tell, is full of a bunch of jiu-jitsu nerds. The less risky way to deal with the body lock is to just set up frames from the beginning. Initially, Gordon frames on Nicky's leg, but Gordon knows that Nicky is going to try and bring his knee down towards the mat so Nicky can step over it. So Gordon goes from framing on Nicky to doing a self-frame on his own leg to make it difficult for Nicky to beat that knee, while he works to set up a frame with his other hand. Once his secondary frame is in place, he takes that self frame out and doubles down, using 2 straight arm frames to stuff the body lock. Like me and you have no idea how to wrestle, this can be a bit hard to hear. Your upper body submissions are going to be very difficult to get, which means your primary attack is going to be to the legs. So you're putting a lot of your eggs in this 0 to 3 minute basket, hoping to finish a lot of your matches early. So it would be nice if there was some data regarding the most successful leg locks. Now, when it comes to heel hooks, you'll often hear 2 statements being thrown around. The first statement is that outside heel hooks are not as effective as inside heel hooks. Now, I think this might be starting to change a bit, especially after Gordon's performance at ADCC and the recent rise in popularity of straight ankle and aoki locks, because the majority of these straight ankle locks and aoki locks happen from straight ashiguramis, which is the same place where you would catch an outside heel hook. But when it comes to straight up heel hooks, it's not even close. 87% of successful heel hooks come from cross ashis as opposed to straight ashis, which means 87% of successful heel hooks at the 66 kilogram division are inside heel hooks. Now, when it comes to inside heel hooks, I think a statement that's often thrown around is that the classic cross ashi or inside senkaku, saddle, whatever you want to call it, is kind of dead.
Try and call it your fucking enemy. were settled.
And more finishes are happening from 50-50. But when we look at the data, the standard cross-ashi still gets more finishes than 50-50. But when we break it down by region, I think we get some very interesting findings. You can see that in every region, there were more cross-ashi finishes than 50-50 finishes, except at the West Coast trials, where there were significantly more 50-50 finishes. Now, although this is interesting, I'm not entirely sure what to make of this data. Maybe you could say that in a lot of regions, people don't have reliable defenses against cross-ashi, compared to competitors at the West Coast trials who are able to defend cross-ashi better, which led to more 50-50 finishes. So maybe at 66 you can get away with playing guard, but as you move up in weight class, you're gonna need to get to top position. Well, the data is in, and in the 77 kilogram division, there were plenty of guillotines, and the number one overall submission was a heel hook. And these two statistics might explain why in the 66 kilogram division, you had a 52% chance of winning if you initiated a takedown. But as we go up a weight division to the 77 kilogram division, if you initiate a takedown, you now only have a 45% chance of winning, meaning that the advantage is now on the side of the person countering. So the people that are preparing for ADCC by practicing their chain wrestling and takedown setups, I think are going to be in for a rude awakening. Because even in collegiate wrestling, where people have extremely good setups in chain wrestling, they get countered a lot.
John talked about is that the highest percentage thing in collegiate wrestling that he was talking about is on the defensive side. So blocking a takedown and then spinning around to the back.
Why are collegiate wrestlers that are competing for the national championship taking horribly bad shots that I would have scolded my 9-year-old for? Well, in my opinion, I think it's because they were tired and they're put in circumstances that force them to take risks. Most of these shots are happening late in the match where the person is down on points. So it's not that they're bad at wrestling, they're just trying to make something happen. And I don't have a statistic on this quite yet, but as far as takedowns go from a jiu-jitsu perspective, you're gonna see a lot more successful single leg and double leg takedowns compared to the amount of successful foot sweeps and throws. So when you're in an absolute war, the match is tied, there's less than a minute left and you have to make something happen. You're probably going to have to use a single leg or a double leg. And based on the situation, your opponent is probably going to expect it, which means you're probably going to end up in the front headlock. Not necessarily because you're a bad wrestler, but mostly because you're tired and the situation backed you into a corner that made you very predictable. In part 1 of my UFC Fight Pass Invitational 4 analysis, I talked about this position here, and I referred to it as the knee outside the hip position, but I asked if anyone knew what it was actually called. And thank you all for providing a lot of answers, and the leader was probably hip pin, but a close second was Captain Morgan. And there were a few references to Danaher's open guard instructional, and in that instructional, Danaher refers to Gordon as the master of this position. And then it hit me. Why not just ask Gordon what they call the position? So I did, and his answer was better than I could have imagined.
My king.
Gordon said that if you're able to off-balance your opponent to their hand, they call that A1 for Ashi 1. And if you're able to put them on their hip, they call that A2. Now, I'm not entirely sure why, but I find it very interesting and insightful that they distinguish between the two. So I went ahead and updated the database to match this terminology. So now when you type in Gordon Ryan A1, you can see that he was able to get to A1 at 13 minutes and 27 seconds into his match against Andre Galvao. And from A1, you can see that Andre takes a big step with his secondary leg to realign himself with Gordon. And Gordon uses that as an opportunity to grab Andre's second foot, off-balance him down to a hip, wrestle up, and take top position. Going into her match with Ffion, Jasmine was talking a lot of shit about the knee cut, so you better believe she had a strategy to deal with it. And it looked like that strategy was to keep her bottom foot on the outside, which makes it pretty much impossible to do a knee cut, and Ffion is forced to disengage. But the problem is that's not the only guard pass Ffion knows. With the foot on the outside, now you gotta deal with leg drags. It also leaves you very vulnerable to stack passing. So we can see Ffion using the threat of the knee cut to force Jasmine to bring her foot to the outside, which leads nicely to a stack guard pass followed by a duck under, resulting in the front headlock. And as Jasmine sits to recover her guard, Ffion almost completes a knee cut. So you can see how she's layering this knee cut nicely behind a series of attacks. Once we get to dominant positions like side control and mount, we want to start isolating limbs. And if you are able to successfully pin their wrist from mount, I really like this sequence from Joseph Chen, where he pins the wrist with one hand and threatens the gift wrap with the other. And he just kind of goes back and forth playing this dilemma until his opponent's elbow gets a bit high, ideally above his own shoulder. And when this happens, you could try and spin for an armbar directly, but I don't think this is the best approach. I prefer what Joseph did and use it as an opportunity to take a second underhook and go into a double chest wrap, which is what you want to transition to S-mount. That, in my opinion, was one of the more beautiful things that happened throughout the event. But this is where things start to go a bit south for Joseph, and I think it's due to him being too committed to this gift wrap grip. This hand is responsible for keeping Gordon on top and addressing the grip of his opponent, and it's constantly bouncing back and forth between these two tasks. And when he's ready, Gordon attacks the armbar, making sure he falls with his hips facing his opponent's feet, and he's able to get a strong finish. But Joseph being so committed to this grip means he doesn't have a lot of base. So when his opponent bridges, Joseph falls, and he falls with his hips facing his opponent's head instead of their feet, resulting in a failed armbar despite a beautiful setup.
Matheus goes for his shotgun Aoki lock on his opponent's left feet, so he kept that left foot way out of range, avoided any danger.
We can see here Matheus applying the Aoki lock to the left leg of William Tackett, and Joseph Chen has had his own left leg on the receiving end of this Aoki lock as well. So he made sure to keep that left leg away and force Matheus to attack the right leg, and he does so by inverting underneath. And that inversion causes Joseph to pummel his left foot in to defend. And now Matheus has exactly what he wants, control over that left leg. We saw him do this exact same thing to Jed Hugh, where he goes into this berimbolo type inversion on the right leg. And as Jed uses that left leg to defend, Matheus gets a hold of it. And when Matheus gets a hold of your left leg, it can end the match very quickly and you're probably going to get injured.
I jump for his back and he kind of pummeled his leg back. So I combine my back takes with my leg locks. So every time they try to defend my back, I go back to the leg. So this is what you saw.
So if you're Joseph and you know this guy has broken your left foot before, and the whole game plan was to keep him away from your left foot, and not even 30 seconds into the match, he now has a hold of it. This must have been extremely difficult for Joseph to mentally overcome.
I was super nervous all the way on the lead up to Matheus, because I was not only scared I was going to lose, I was scared I was going to get hurt. The last time it was a significant injury.
So this, in my opinion, is a very critical moment in the match. And what Joseph did surprised me very much. He attacked Matheus with a straight ankle lock of his own, which is extremely impressive and a very clear sign that Joseph is not here just to take part.
That boy here to take over the game.
He was very disciplined with just digging his hands underneath my legs to try to come out the back door from guard passing positions and shooting to deep half, so that was kind of annoying.
Now, in order for someone to be effective from deep half guard, they need to split your legs apart. So one way to counter this is by bringing your legs together or even crossing your feet. And again, this isn't something I came up with, it's what Gordon talks about in his instructional. I'm just trying to present it to you in an organized way.
And I deny him the ability to go into deep half with crossed ankles.
So the game becomes, if our opponent takes a scoop grip, we're trying to take a crossface or a near side underhook or a near side head block. Anything to try and stop our opponent from getting underneath our center of gravity. But once they take out that scoop grip to post on our hip, now they're not trying to get underneath us, they're trying to extend away from us. So now would be a good time to switch to an overback grip and split your legs apart, to make it very difficult for them to extend themselves. Here we can see Gordon playing this game beautifully. When he initially gets to the overback grip, Patrick is posting on his hip, so Gordon has his feet split apart. But once Patrick switches to a scoop grip, Gordon switches to a crossface and brings his legs together. Here we can see Gordon settling down into chest-to-chest half guard, and he takes a crossface and crosses his feet because Gaudio is reaching for that scoop grip. And now here is where I think we get to see the next level of this game being played, where Pedro has a scoop grip on Gordon's leg, so he crosses his feet and starts digging for a crossface. Now the goal of this crossface is to win the battle of knee position. And once Gordon's knee is able to steal the inside position at the hip, it's pretty much a done deal. And if we hop into the training resources, we can see Giancarlo talks about this knee position in his instructional. And the basic idea behind this is we first win the battle of knee position on the near side. And then once we've beaten the near knee, we worry about the far knee.
Now that my knee's inside, now we're safe to go about playing the knee heel.
If I remember correctly, in the Tommy match, you did quite a lot of loose passing, even though you were worried about getting entangled, and it seemed like the only time he really entangled you was when you had like a near side underhook and he had a scoop grip, and you like really had to work to get you entangled, and then you were out of there like relatively quickly. Is there maybe a technique specifically that you avoided?
And with Tommy especially, like the game plan was no high stepping, outside passing left to the right, force him to the right hip, go to the left, because he's really good with his matrix style type of guard, especially if you high step pass. Like you can watch the stuff on B Team, I think. It's Nicky Ryan with Tommy, and you see Nicky Ryan loves the high step, right? Nicky Ryan is one of the most gifted passers in Jiu-Jitsu, but Tommy entangled every time. So every time Nicky did a high step, Tommy entangled. So we wanted to avoid that, and I think Joseph did it masterful.
Nicholas Marigali from the back on the underhook side trapped the arm of Felipe Pena and then used his hand to assist him in locking that bottom side body triangle. And this looks very similar to what Gordon did against Vinicius in the 2019 ADCC finals, where he traps the arm from the underhook side and uses a hand assist to lock a bottom side body triangle. And if you want to study this sequence a bit more, you can hop into the training resource and see where Gordon talks about this sequence in his instructional. And the basic idea is that from the back on the underhook side, if you trap your opponent's arm and try and lock a top side body triangle, you're gonna give them space to free their arm. So Gordon advises to use a hand assist to lock a bottom side body triangle, which is exactly what Marigali did. And he even finished with a one-handed rear naked choke, which is exactly how Gordon finished his sequence. So it's very hard to deny the impact that Gordon is having not only on Marigali, but on Jiu-Jitsu as a whole.